Yeah, is it recording? It hasn't come up on my screen. There we go, recording has started. Prynhawn Dark ISO, good afternoon. Welcome to Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council full council meeting on today, Wednesday, the 1st of December 2021. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast on the authority's internet site, and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the authority. So item 1 is apologies for absence.
I think that everybody is here, Mr. Mayor, unless Mair is able to tell me anything else.
No, Carys, I've not received any. Everyone is here.
Right, okay. I may need to leave the meeting at 7 o'clock. Hopefully it won't be a long meeting this evening, but if it is, I may need to leave. And Councillor Salmon will be taking over at that, if that is the case. I'm, for various reasons, having to work from home this evening, which is why I'm not wearing the chain, but Carys assures me that that is fully in line with the Constitution. We don't need that. So next item, item 2, declarations of interest. Councillor David Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Declaration of item 9, personal and prejudicial. I own a property and business that would be affected by this report.
Okay, anybody else? Right, I don't think I need to declare on this, Carys, because my business is closing at the beginning of March and this is from the following April, so I think I'm okay with that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think that's fine.
Okay, so item 3 then is, Councillor Geraint-Thomas.
Just in case, Carys, I think I've already declared an interest too in that item.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Anybody else? No, nobody else. Item 3, minutes of previous meetings. Can we have a proposer for that, please?
Yes, I move those minutes 3 to 3.g.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please?
Yes, happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I'll pass you over to Carys to conduct a vote then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please could any member wishing to abstain on this item show now? Thank you. Any member voting against, please show now. Thank you. All those in favour, please show now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Thank you. If we could lower our hands then, please. There we go. Item 4 is a notice of motion, developing public involvement in the planning process. And I believe Councillor Declan Salmon is proposing this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The notice of motion is as follows. For the purpose of developing public involvement in the planning process, with the intention being the introduction of the opportunity for the public to speak at committee, we ask that a report be brought to the Planning, Regulatory and Licensing Committee. The report should outline the pros and cons of changing the current format, along with suggested protocol on the number of speakers, the length of time they can speak for, and provision for the applicant of a right to reply. After debate at the Planning Committee, if members feel this is something they agree on and want to see actions, they should recommend that it then be presented at the earliest opportunity to full council, as this would entail a change to the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please?
I will second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Neill. So are there any questions on this then, please? Councillor Chris Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to direct a question to the monitoring officer. Carys, I wonder whether you could perhaps share with members an update on where council is in respect of the work that's been undertaken by the Deputy Monitoring Officer, Senior Solicitor, working alongside a group of cross-party elected members, which I'm one of, in respect of updating the council's constitution using the All Wales model, because some of what's in the notice of motion is absolutely going to be picked up in that piece of work. So I wondered whether you could perhaps ably assist members on where we are with some of that work that Simon's doing.
Yes, certainly. There's a meeting on Friday of this week of the Monitoring Officers Group where there should be a report back about the progress with finalising a new model constitution. The discussions that we've had so far are to the effect that we would in all likelihood be recommending to you that you adopt that model constitution almost in its entirety, although there will then be opportunity for us to adapt it so that it suits our purposes. There are a number of authorities who do have provision in their constitutions for people, members of the public, to speak in some of these committees, and equally there are others that don't. I don't know what the model constitution would say, but whatever we adopted, we would be able to adapt it to whatever we wanted it to say. So it would be a question of us in that small group, and then as the model comes before council for approval, to determine whether you wanted this provision to be included in it or not. To give you a time scale, therefore, the body who were tasked with coming up with the final version of the new model constitution were asked to do that by the end of December. So what we are going to do is have another meeting of our little working group and have some feedback, hopefully in December. And then the aim would be sort of probably we'll be looking at like February of next year when we should have a new model constitution that we can bring before council for prospective adoption.
Mr. Mayor, can I thank the Monitoring Officer for that update and outlining the timescales? So potentially, Monitoring Officer, we could be in a position, if all goes well, and we can do the work as a group with Simon, that we could bring something to council that could include the provisions in respect of what has been proposed in the notice of motion to council prior to us hitting the pre-election period.
Yes, we would certainly be aiming to bring a draft constitution before you go into pre-election, yes.
Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, thank you for the clarification there, Cerys. Councillor Amos, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must be honest, Councillor Davies has covered a lot of the questions I was going to ask, but and I am going back quite a long time now. I seem to recall this issue coming before a scrutiny panel before, when chose a long ago. I think it was the late Councillor Dave Lewis was chairing the scrutiny committee, if I'm not far wrong. And this came up, and one of the things that was highlighted was that there could be problems with if one particular person wasn't invited or couldn't make it, could that form part of an objection to an approval, or in fact, or a refusal. And I seem to think that it was looked at and then it wasn't done. I totally agree with the motion. I think it's a good one, but I'm not sure if you recall it going to scrutiny before. I'm considering this. Can I just ask whether you can remember it?
Mr. Mayor, perhaps I can just help you. Councillor Clyde Jones has got his hand up and he may have direct recollection. But I think it may help just to say that, as with anything where you make provision for involvement of members of the public, but where there would have to be some discretion on the part of members and officers about how that was run, there is always the possibility that that will bring either challenge or dispute. Equally, you can say it provides an opportunity for the public to have a more direct involvement in your processes. So that's the balance that you always have to strike in considering this kind of thing. Historically, this council had always taken the view that it was better not to provide that opportunity because of the risks of potential challenge and potential dispute that could arise from that process. But that's not to say that that's the view that you would take now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clive Jones, did you have a question or was it clarification?
No, it was a question, Mr. Mayor, thanks. And a question to Caris. If this report comes back to the council, I think you said in February, does that mean, where was in that report, that the planning committee will have an opportunity of debating this and coming to a decision?
I think that's the distinction. We are blurring off into a discussion about what's going to happen with the Constitution generally. The notice of motion before you is about a specific process to take it back to planning, so that planning can have a view, which planning would then bring back to council. Now, whether planning bring that back to council by way of a separate representation, or whether that comes back perhaps to the group of cross-party members who are considering the Constitution, so that it could just be included in the Constitution, so that that goes back to council, is probably something that can be decided at a later stage. But yeah, I think the point that you make is entirely valid. This is about allowing the planning committee to consider the ins and outs of this before it becomes something that needs to be decided by council. So that's the thing you have to decide, is do you want planning to consider it first in terms of this motion, or do we leave it just as something that's considered as part of the overall constitutional reform?
Yeah, I think, you know, even the planning committee members would want particular clarification on that point. Clearly the debate needs to take place in the planning committee, as the motion states. So I didn't want to see a situation where a report comes back, the Constitution says one thing, where the planning committee haven't been able to debate it. But I understand what you're saying, and hopefully we will go along with what is saying in the motion, which will give the opportunity to the planning committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Carter, has your point been answered?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it has actually, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Were there any more questions on this then, please? Councillor Darren Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For myself personally, I think this is a good thing involving the public and letting them have their say. Is all part of democracy. Obviously, they can have their say at the ballot box, but when it comes to planning applications, we all know some can be a little bit more volatile than others. It's just an observation and a question, a request from myself, Mr. Mayor. It says at the top of the motion that the must be signed by at least 2 councillors and must be delivered to the proper officer no later than 12 noon, 8 working days before the date of the meeting. These will be entered into a book open to public inspection. But the motion itself hasn't got a date that it was written, and it hasn't got a date that it was received by Democratic Services. So I'd just like to see all motions actually comply with the policy that is set out by Democratic Services moving forward. Thank you.
I think we are sort of, I'm struggling to see how that's a question. If I take it as being a question, is that something that's going to happen in the future? I'll then say, yes, we'll make sure that that happens in the future. I think the way the process works is that it wouldn't have been included in the agenda if it hadn't complied with those time limits. So if I can say that by way of reassurance, but yes, of course, Councillor Roberts, you're right, that there should be a date on it, and we'll make sure that that's checked in the future.
Yeah, I raised it under questions, Monitoring Officer, for that reason, just asking that question rather than as a comment. But yeah, I take on board what you're saying. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Roberts. Are there any other questions? No one is indicating. So are there any comments, please? Councillor Chris Davis is first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't believe twice in a row now I've been in front of Councillor Clive Jones. It must be a record. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is fantastic notice of motion, and you know, absolutely long overdue for this council. I think just to echo those words of Councillor Roberts, I absolutely share them. You know, we are the elected members here to represent the residents of this county borough, and they are not afforded the opportunity of such important issues such as planning to come and have a say, to express their viewpoint. And I've been in previous administrations where I've absolutely been, appalled by that as an opportunity on such emotive issues as obviously the Red House and the Old Town Hall when the planning went through on that. So this is only absolutely a positive thing. I think, what the monitoring officer said about, the fear of, potential challenge, we should be absolutely, resilient and open to that. They're absolutely in the principles of Nolan. I think we are slowly moving away from being an organisation that's risk averse. So absolutely, support this motion. I've been in a situation myself recently in my own ward where luckily the matter's now been withdrawn, the planning application, but the ward member who sits on the planning committee to represent our ward had to declare, rightly so, a personal and prejudicial interest, which left myself and my other ward colleague not being able to come to committee and make representations on behalf of the people we represent. We were only left with a situation where we could make written representations that could be included in the professional officer's report. And for me, for someone who's here, democratically elected, to represent the people who put a cross against the box for me, that is not on, that's not fair, that's not acceptable, and that's absolutely not democracy. So all for this, and all for it being debated at the planning committee, and I would say brought back to the ideas, suggestions, comments of the planning committee, brought back to the constitutional group so we can absolutely get this bang smack on the face of the constitution and let's see power to the people of Merthyr Tydfil. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Kevin O'Neill, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My observation would be that the planning and associated matters is more likely one of the most difficult and important issues that local councils have to deal with. They can have life-changing impact for everybody concerned. Greater public engagement and participation in the process can only be positive for local democracy and effective and ethical decision making. I thoroughly support this motion, and I look forward to see the outcomes from the discussions and meetings of those parties involved with the planning process. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Andrew Barry, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I find myself in total agreement with my fellow councillors, particularly what Chris Davis was saying. And also what Councillor Darren Robs is saying there. It's a highly contentious area, and it's something we've thrown ourselves into in terms of being that conduit between the public and those applications, some which come in and don't appear to be very contentious, such as the St Tidbil ones at the moment. And then we have things like Persimmon and we have J Plus, which are highly contentious. I mean, when we put out on our page that application was due for Persimmon, over 20,000 engaged with the page. Massive response. By us taking a move such as this, and absolutely right to point out how complex this could potentially be, I welcome a view by the planning committee, and I know it's not easy, but it's absolutely the right thing to do, to give the people of Merthyr an opportunity to speak at these planning applications, because I think we've moved away from the day where the diggers turn up and that's the first they've heard of it. Our engagement as councillors is such that we bring them early view of it. Now the next natural step is to have them involved in it. I fully support and congratulate Councillor Salmon on writing an excellent, a really excellent piece of work here. I'm fully supported. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Councillor Tony Rogers is next.
Just 2 points it is to the monitoring officer. If I think I'm correct over the years, and we've had quite a few forward. If it's referred from planning to full council, they're allowed to speak, aren't they? The applicants. If it's referred to a full council. Just upon my memory right, I think it happened a few times with us. Wind farms, I think, was one.
I don't think members of the public are allowed to speak. What I think has happened on occasion when things have come before council is that there has been special provision for presentations so that members have the full grasp of all of the facts. So rather than what this sort of motion would bring into effect. I think that has been on very specific, very major developments where it's essential that members have a presentation so they've got a full grasp of everything that goes on.
Oh,
Does that fit with your recollection? I can see Councillor Clive Jones nodding, and that is my understanding of where we are with that.
Or I remember just a small point as well, just a point of correction. I've just checked the video evidence, and Chris, you were actually offside. So I'm sorry, Clive have retained it, and I'm sorry, he's won again. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, to remind the monitoring officer, though, if a report comes in front of full council, doesn't the Constitution allow for members of the public to ask questions? You're on mute, monitoring officer.
I'm trying not to be. Right, there we are. It does allow members of the public to put questions in a very limited format and on a very specific basis. That's not what this notice of motion is about. It's about speaking in a more open way.
I was responding to what Councillor Rogers has said. Well, we have had members of the public who have had asked questions on reports in council. I think I remember there may have been some questions asked by members of the public at Yscol y Graig.
Let's not get ourselves too much into the constitutional debate. Yeah, the members of the public are allowed to ask questions. They're not allowed to speak. That's what this is about. So just to be clear, yes, of course, you will have had members of the public asking questions, but it's not quite the same thing as what we're considering here.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Julian Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll echo the sentiment of everybody who's spoken. Really, I think this is long overdue. It's an excellent motion. The only problem but with a small p I could see was that possibly obviously the applicant is going to be allowed to speak as well as any residents or objectors, and possibly that might get a bit heated, but I think that is inevitable in democracy, you know. But I think obviously if the applicant isn't allowed to speak, well then, as the monitoring officer said earlier, that leaves the way open then to challenges on the actual decision. But I support the motion. I think it's an excellent one.
Thank you, Councillor Amos. I'll just put in my last word then, if I can. I'm fully in support of this motion. It's something that members of the Planning Committee have pushed for a long time, and I know that Councillor Howard Barrett was a particular proponent of this. So I'm really glad to see this notice of motion, and hopefully we can move this forward. Those of us who have sat on the Brecon Beacons Planning Authority are quite used to members of the public being able to speak, and it's a system that works very well. So I look forward to this being passed, and I'll hand you over to the monitoring officer to take a vote on it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, can I then ask that anybody who wishes to abstain, can you please show now? Thank you. Can I ask any person to vote against, please show now. Thank you. Anybody wishing to vote in favour, please show now. Councillor Chris Davis, I know that you were going to vote in favour of this, but I can't see the hand has come up. There.
Sorry, Monty. She seems to be sticking, I think, so many on the screen.
I think that's what it is, isn't it? We just need to be a bit patient with it. But yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Thank you all. If we could lower our hands, please. There we go. Thank you very much. So now we move on to committee reports. Agenda item number 5, council tax base for 2022-23, and it's Councillor Andrew Barry who's leading on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council tax base 2023. The report sets out the council tax base rate for 21-22 from which the council tax will be derived. The calculation takes into account changes to the valuation list that appear likely to occur during 2022-23. We set the council tax base rate every year in accordance with the prescribed regulations highlighted at 3.1 of your papers. At 3.2, you can see the latest valuation list upon which the calculation is based. The calculation is made with a number of banded properties within the local authority area and takes into account discounts and exemptions, adjustments, and the changes to the valuation list during the year. The detail of the latest valuation list band ratios within the calculation can be seen as 3.2 to 3.3. Our council tax collection rate is key and we'll continue to monitor it through the year, currently set at 96%. We do have Mark Price with us tonight to answer any technical questions you may have, but first, Mr. Mayor, if I take you to the recommendations at 2.1, taking into account the number of properties in each valuation band, discount, reductions for disabilities, future likely changes to the valuation list, I would recommend that the council pass the following resolution. The pursuant to the report and in accordance with the local authority and council tax regulations 2004, the number calculated by the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council for 2022-23 shall be 18,587.44, and the area covered by the Brendan Archer Lewis Community Council for the 2022-23 shall be 1,163.52. I move the council tax base for 22-23, Mr. Mayor.
I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mitten. Are there any questions then, please? Nobody is indicating for a question, so are there any comments, please? No, there are no comments. So, Caris, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please, would all members wishing to abstain show now. Thank you. All members wishing to vote against, please show now. All members wishing to vote in favour, please show now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Okay, thank you. If we could lower our hands then, please. I'm still showing some hands. I don't know if there's a lag on my screen, but Councillor Hughes, Councillor Roberts, Councillor David Hughes, thank you. Agenda item number 6, Treasury Management Outrun Report 2020-21, and that's Andrew Barry again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Treasury Management Outturn Report 2021. This report, Mr. Mayor, alludes to the hard edge of financial management and a glimpse of what Steve and the accountancy team deal with through Arlington Close-Out Treasury Management Consultants. The report itself is Appendix 1 that talks of the authority's management of our cash flows, banking, money and capital market transactions, such as the authority borrows where it invests substantial amounts of money, and as at the 31st of March 2021, net borrowing was 96 million. Subsequently, we're exposed to financial risk and any change in interest rates that in the current climate are imminent. The report highlights implications such as the Public Works Loans Board changed its lending terms that restricts borrowing for yield. Economic background has, as I alluded to in the presentation of the final accounts last month, been unprecedented. COVID pandemic and subsequent vaccine rollout, Brexit trade deal being already unbelievably 12 months on, 10 million workers on the furlough scheme, unemployment rising to 5%, inflation falling to 0.4% during the pandemic, and now expected to rise to 5% by next April. Growth within the economy has been much higher than expected, with the Bank of England interest rates at 0.1% at a historically low level. And as I say, unprecedented year. And the report describes all of those economic pointers and risks to the authority, along with the assurance from our 151 officer, Steve Jones, that we're in compliance with the SIPFA regulations and the code of practice, along with our approved treasury management strategy, with the exceptions detailed at page 7 and page 45 of your papers. So to the recommendations at 2.1, that the treasury management outturn report for 2021 be received, and at 2.2, the actual 2021 treasury indicators be received. I move the report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Seconder, please.
Yeah, I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Minton. Are there any questions then, please? Have to bear with me 1 sec. I've got a slight technical problem.
There don't seem to be any questions.
Yeah, no questions. Any comments then, please? No comments. So over to you then, Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, can I ask then, please, any member wishing to abstain, could you please show now? Thank you. Any member wishing to vote against, could you please show now? Thank you. Any member wishing to vote in favour, please show now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Thank you. If you could lower our hands then, please. Thank you. Agenda item number 7, Treasury Management Half-Year Review Report 2021 to 22, and that's Councillor Andrew Barry again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report, Mr. Mayor, much as the previous report, updates members on the same management of our cash flows, banking, money and capital market transactions in the first 6-month stage of the financial year. The review report is at Appendix A, and it talks of the authorities' work within the financial markets with our specialist consultant again, Arlington Close. The key message to note in this report is the increase in inflationary figure rising to 3.2% in August. And as this continues to rise, the resultant pressures on the prevailing interest rates into the future will have an effect on this authority. Just the one recommendation, Mr. Mayor, 2.1, the Treasury Management Half-Year Review Report for 21-22 be received.
Thank you. A seconder, please.
Yes, I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor David Chaplin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Briefly touched on by Councillor Barry. In recent years, we benefited from record low interest rates. Is the authority concerned with having £56 million in short-term loans that interest rates will rise? Because currently the CPI is now at 4.2%, so it's raised from the August figure that was commented on by Andrew Barry, and the Bank of England is under extreme pressure to raise interest rates.
I'll take that to start, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely spot on, Councillor Chaplin. I think there was a lot of surprise that the interest rate wasn't raised last month. I think there's immense pressure for it to go up. It will cause problems, and at that point, we'll bring you in, Steve, to give us some idea of where we find ourselves.
Yes, I would add that obviously we are in discussions with Arlington Close, who have got that kind of expertise and specialist skills. What we've been advised at this point in time is that our short-term interest rates will probably rise sometime in the future, obviously sometime very shortly, but it's a case really of understanding when perhaps then we have to revert to some more long-term loans instead of the short-term. So for now, we are reasonably confident that everything is being actually budgeted for, but there is a case that sometime in the future that, as I said, really, we will have to basically think long and hard about whether or not then we revert back into longer term loans.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve, and thank you, Councillor Barry.
Okay, thanks for the question, Councillor Chaplin. Councillor Kevin Gibbs is next then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for Steve, I think, to be honest, Andrew, is regarding the Lobo loans, which I tend to bring up most years with our accountancy department. Steve, I noticed that the Lobo loans we've got outstanding are at 12 million in total with Commerce Banks. We still have 28 years remaining, paying an annual interest rate of 540,000 per annum. That's still the case at the moment, yeah?
It is, yes. It is still the case at the moment.
Have we tried to negotiate any lower deal to come out of these Lobo loans with Commerce Bank?
Yes, it's certainly something that we looked at about 18 months or so ago. And at that time, the actual penalty was far too high. At this point in time as well, with Arlene Close, we are going to have a discussion again with the bank and basically then see whether or not we just are able to repay these loans. Again, it'll be down to exactly what the penalty will be. We have to set, and just then we have to assess whether or not that is actually affordable or not. But that is something that we are in discussions with the bank with, yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Because I do notice from research I've done, the Commerce Bank has actually allowed 8 councils to exit 19 loans at a much more preferable rate than what the normal exit fee would be. Can you confirm, Steve, when you had the discussions roughly about 18 months ago, what was the exit fee then?
Oh, thinking out off the top of my head, I know it was something that we didn't feel was actually affordable at that time. And in fact, it might have been more than 18 months ago, because obviously we've been in pandemic, for the last 18 months. So I can't recall off the top of my head, but we did consider at that time that it was just not, that it just wasn't affordable.
Yeah, and what is the because isn't there a fixed exit fee for these type of loans at present? Is this something like this, the same amount as the capital outstanding?
No, it's all about the number of years left on the actual loan. It's in respect of interest rates at that particular time and where the bank then currently sees interest rates in the future. So it's all got that as part of the actual calculation itself. But there could well be scope for us in the future, in that sometime soon, that we could be able to actually repay these loans.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. And I think that was it. Was it one last question? No, one last question. Because these type of loans, from my understanding, is the bank can just put up the interest rates whenever it wants without any negotiation. Is that still the case on these particular loans, Steve?
It's certainly the case that if the bank was to actually increase those rates, then they would have to inform us in advance, obviously. And then it's a case of whether or not we are happy to just accept that or not. If we don't accept it, then we can repay at that interest rate of 4.5%, and then we can replace those loans then with another source.
Yeah, and from my understanding, wasn't it another review date that the bank could actually just pull the loan completely and ask for full repayment?
Not that I can actually recall that there was a review date, because there was a very initial review date where the actual interest rates stepped up, in that after a couple of years that the interest rates went from something like 3.57% up to 4.5%. But I don't believe that there is another review date. It's as and when the bank wants to basically and actually increase that rate, and then actually informs us and of their intention, or if it's the case that we wish to just actually repay those loans.
Lovely. Okay, thanks for clarifying that, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbs. Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I take members on this report to page 56? And it's paragraph 4.6 under the heading UK Infrastructure Bank. States 4 million has been earmarked for lending to local authorities by the UK Infrastructure Bank, which is wholly owned and backed by Her Majesty's Treasury. The availability of this lending to local authorities, for which there will be a bidding process, is yet to commence. Loans will be available for qualifying projects at yields plus 0.6%, which is 0.2% lower than the Public Works Loan Board certainty rate. Mr. Mayor, I seem to remember that this announcement by the HM Treasury was some time ago. And could I ask, are we aware, or what are the reasons why this hasn't commenced yet?
Yes, if I could answer there. I'm not exactly certain, but as far as we are concerned, we haven't borrowed any long-term loans for a number of years now. So we haven't even entered into loans with the Public Works Loan Board either. So as far as we're concerned, we haven't entered into long-term loans, but I'm uncertain as to why that, with this new form of loans, that it hadn't started at this point in time.
Stephen, in the changing mode that there is in the country now, we might be going into more long-term loans. Is that in view of the discussion earlier on?
I think it's the case that we'll have to assess when is that right time for us and to just go into long-term loans where we can fix a loan at a reasonable interest rate instead of then being at the mercy of just the actual market and those short-term interest rates. So again, really, it's just advising, or we'll have a discussion with Arlene Close, who are our consultants, and they will be able to advise us of that optimum time.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Any comments then, please? No, there's no comments, so it's back over to Karis then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask all those wishing to abstain, can you please show now? Thank you. All those wishing to vote against, can you please show now? Thank you. All those wishing to vote in favour, please show now. I think, Mr. Mayor, there you go. It just hadn't recorded you, but thank you. That's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. If we could lower our hands then, please. Right, I've just lost my place for a second monitoring officer. Was that item 7 or item 8? Sorry, item 6 or item 7?
Item 8 now, Mr. Mayor, I believe. Yeah.
That was item 7, so this is item 8. Okay, thank you. Telling everybody to put their hands down, and mine is still up. There we go. Agenda item number 8, then please, which is change of committee time, planning, regulatory and licensing. And that's Councillor Mitten, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'll just run through the summary of the report. At the AGM in May 2021, Full Council approved a cycle of statutory meetings for the municipal year 2021-2022. The dates included planning, regs and licensing committee to be held approximately every 4th week on a Wednesday, commencing at 4 p.m. Historically, the committee has commenced at 5 p.m. and at the planning, regs and licensing committee on the 9th of June 2021, the committee agreed to revert back to a 5 p.m. start. Advice was sought from the monitoring officer and the change was informally agreed for the period of 6 months on the proviso that the agenda front sheet included the following statement: for the convenience of members, the start time has been changed from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. The 6 months has now elapsed and we are bringing the item back to council formally the time to 5 p.m. Therefore, the recommendations are 2.1, the planning, regs and licensing committee commence at 5 p.m. for the remainder of the committee cycle for the 2021-2022 municipal year be approved, and therefore I move. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconder, please.
I'd second that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions then, please? Councillor Chris Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I ought to direct the questions to the head of paid service and the chief executive, as I've been having a little look and I can't see the report author his share in the meeting, but correct me if I am wrong. But obviously, as the person who signed the bottom with the leader, I'll direct my questions to the chief executive, if that's okay with him. I am quite bamboozled by how we get this report back here some months after the council's annual general meeting. Could the chief executive explain how we found ourselves in a position at AGM where papers were presented to members to consider a move of the planning committee to 4 p.m. and perhaps who maybe decided that change of time? Because as far as I'm aware, planning committee has always been at 5 o'clock. How did that slip through the council agenda?
Before the chief exec answers, can I just make the point that you all voted for it? So there's a very simple moral there that you just need to be very careful to read your papers so that you know when these things are there. I'm not sure that there was much in the way of a formal decision. I think what happens is Democratic Services have to set meetings and they agree that with various officers and members, and that then goes into the AGM. So I'm not sure that there was any great plan about it. It was simply that was what was included, and then members all agreed it.
So are you, monitoring officer, answering for the chief executive, or because he obviously is at the bottom of the report?
I was just trying to assist on that point, but of course, if the chief exec has something he wants to add to that to assist with your question, I'm sure he will.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Councillor Davis, if we're going to, what I'll have to do is I'll have to make inquiries how we actually got to that point. I'm not sure if it was an oversight in terms of miscommunication, but I can certainly follow that up, come back to. Obviously, the intention of the report was to regularise the position and put it back to, as members wished, the 5 o'clock position. But I can certainly follow up on that and come back to it.
I appreciate that, and I accept that errors do happen, and I accept the monitoring officers, thing that is for members to equally scrutinise the papers. Can I just ask a question about, well, maybe was it for the convenience of officers, because the term loosely has been used for the convenience of members, and I would ask, is that an appropriate word to use in a council report? Surely meetings of this council shouldn't be for the convenience of members. Members are elected to attend meetings, and it's not for their convenience, it's because we're elected to represent. So just ask somebody, was that a suitable and appropriate form of words really to be used in this report?
What I'll do, Councillor Davis, obviously is a matter in terms of style, I would suggest, in terms of how that's written. But again, when I come back to you with a fuller response, we can pick that one up as well.
Okay, Judith, did you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, I can possibly help with how we arrived at the 4 o'clock. It was proposed following discussion I had with the head of Democratic Services, and it was proposed as 4 o'clock to bring us in line with all other local authorities, because we're the only local authority that currently have a planning meeting in the evening. All others do it at either 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock. So that was the reason for it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on this? No further questions. Are there any comments on this, please? Councillor Scott Thomas is first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thankfully, Councillor Chris Davis stole a little bit of my thunder on that one. I'd only realised reading this report that the wording in respect of for the convenience of councillors or for the convenience of members was used for this, and from my understanding, it was never for the convenience of councillors. It was for the convenience of the public more than that, to be able to attend meetings should they wish to, given that obviously members of the public may work various hours and are only available at that time. Hence why also the meetings were at 5 p.m. So that's my only observation on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Tuvey, you've taken your hand down. Has Scott covered your point? You're on mute, Clive. Councillor Tuvey, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, I was just going to say, if we're going to invite the members of public to speak at meetings, 5 o'clock is a much better time anyway. You know, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tuvey. Councillor Clive Jones, you're definitely slowing down this evening for some reason. It's your turn now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, the 5 o'clock time, and I've been a member off and on since 1995, is frankly so that we can accommodate members of the public and elected members to attend the planning committee. It's important for both to be there. Frankly, any earlier time in the day does make it difficult, Mr. Mayor, for both. There are a number of elected members on the planning committee who have got jobs in the daytime, and similarly with members of the public. So frankly, whatever's happening in the other authorities is really no concern to me. It's what we are able to do to accommodate those members of the public who wish to attend, and particularly those who wish to sit in the public gallery, and for those elected members who are able to attend later in the day rather than earlier in the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Chris Davis with a comment, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, and I thank the Chief Officer for Neighbourhood Services for coming forward and being transparent and open and honest, in her helpful comments about, you know, aligning, you know, planning committee start times with other authorities. But we do things here and should do things here in the Merthyr Tydfil way. And obviously it slipped through that AGM because none of us saw it. All 30 face, not even the eagle-eyed Clive Jones picked it up. It got past him as well. But we absolutely, you know, just need to ensure that, you know, we've had conversations this evening about this very matter of representation at the planning committee, and meetings of this council need to be for the convenience of, well, actually not for the convenience of officers, but actually for the availability of members to engage, because we are ultimately the elected representatives who are here to serve the members of the public. The staff are here to service the needs of the council and the council business, including the support to elected members. So that's all I'll say on the matter, Mr. Mayor, and I welcome the Chief Exec's comments about the use of language in council reports, and I'm sure he'll reflect upon that for future reference.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. Any more comments on this, please? No more comments, so it's back to Caris for a vote then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask that any member who wishes to abstain on this matter, please show now. Thank you. Any member wishing to vote against, please show now. Thank you. Any member wishing to vote in favour, please show now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Thank you. If we could lower our hands again then, please.
You have a number of members who are going to need to leave prior to this next item.
Okay, which is item 9, the 3-year revision of Statement of Licensing Policy 2022 to 2025 under the Gambling Act 2005. Can we just confirm that the members who have declared an interest have left this meeting? Can either Caris or Democratic Services confirm that?
I don't know if anybody in Democratic Services can tell me, but I can't see the members who declared an interest now, so I think we are all set to go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, to continue. Good. Councillor Kevin O'Neill then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The summary of the report is as follows. Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council, in accordance with the Gambling Act 2005, has a legal requirement to review its gambling licence policy every 3 years. The gambling licensing policy sets out how the council regulates gambling, licensed premises, permits and authorisations for temporary use of premises, amongst other matters. On the 1st of September 2021, a revised policy was put before the Planning, Regulatory and Licensing Committee, with members resolving that the same be put for the public consultation. The revised gambling licence policy must come into force on 31st of January 2022. The Act requires that the gambling licensing policy is published for a period of at least 4 weeks before the date in which it comes into effect. Amendments to the existing policy were few and were made to reflect current legislation and national guidance. The consultation took place over an 8-week period. There were 3 responders, all of whom agreed that the draft gambling policy should be adopted. The recommendation is as follows: that the revised Statement of Licensing Policy 2022 to 2025 be approved and to come into force on the 31st of January 2022. I so moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. As a seconder, please.
Yeah, I second that, Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Midden. Are there any questions? There are no. Oh yes, Councillor Gareth Richards, please.
Just a brief question, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. It's just within the report, as Councillor O'Neill outlined, that the amendments were very minor. Could one of the officers or Councillor O'Neill give an example of what the minor amendments are, without having to troll through both documents, please?
I'll have to refer that to the officers, Councillor. Is anybody there can assist?
Yeah, if I can come in there, Councillor O'Neill, we're going to have to get back to you on that, Councillor Richards, because there's no officer from licensing here tonight, unfortunately, because of prior commitments. But I'll get back.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you first thing in the morning.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks very much. Thank you, Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No one else is indicating. Are there any comments? Councillor Richards, you still have your hand up. Was that for quite? Oh, it's gone down now. Thank you. No, it's back up again. Did you have a comment or? No, we've gone back down again. So there are no comments. So we're back over to Caris for a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask all those who wish to abstain, can you please show now? Thank you. All those voting against, please show now. Thank you. All those voting in favour, please show now. There, that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. If we could lower our hands then, please. Councillor Tavey, could you lower your hand, please? Thank you. Agenda item number 10 is an information report. Agenda item number 11 to deal with any other urgent business or correspondence. There is none. Item number 12 to receive communications from His Worship the Mayor. I have none. So thank you very much, members. That concludes the meeting for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor.